Welcome. Today, we're doing something a little different. Instead of just explaining a topic, we're actually going to take a test. This is the Master Researcher Certification Exam, and it's designed to walk us through a very specific and, let's just say, controversial view of history. So, let's see what it's all about.
Okay, so this test is based entirely on a body of research known as the Hebrew-Tyrian POW archive. It presents a pretty radical reinterpretation of history, and this exam is designed to test your fluency in its core claims. Your examination is about to begin.
And, every official sounding document needs a product ID, right? There it is. But what's really important is the subject matter we're about to dive into.
Our subject today, the 1619 deception and the Hebrew-Tyrian Admiralties. Now, those are some provocative terms. The theory behind them connects biblical lineages, European history, and the founding of America. Let's see how, starting in the first section.
Section 1. A question of identity. To understand this theory, we really have to start where it does, with biblical ancestry. So, let's begin with our first question.
All right, first question. According to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, who is considered the traditional ancestor of Europeans? Is it A, Shem, B, Ham, C, Japheth, or D, Canaan?
And the correct answer, according to this specific research archive, is Japheth. This is a really key starting point for the rest of the theory. Let's move on.
Now we're going to shift from biblical texts to genetics. According to the archive, there's a specific lineage they call the True Shemitic Remnant. The question is, what is the primary Y DNA marker associated with this group?
The answer given in the archive is E1B1A, also known as the E-group. Now, in this framework, this genetic marker is presented as the crucial piece of evidence used to separate the true lineage from others. Now we get to Section 2, the identity theft theory. This is the heart of the archive's claim, the idea that a massive, centuries-long case of stolen identity has shaped our modern world. So, if there was an identity theft, you have to ask who was involved. This question gets specific. Which 8th century empire is central to this theory, particularly when it comes to Ashkenazi Jews?
The answer is the Khazar Empire. And according to this theory, the timeline is everything. The empire emerges, and then, in the 8th century, a pivotal event occurs, a mass conversion to Judaism. This act is presented as the origin point of the alleged identity theft.
This theory then links that historical event directly to biblical prophecy. So, in the book of Revelation, what term is used to describe a group of people who say they are Jews and are not?
The term used is the synagogue of Satan. Now, within this archive, this verse isn't seen as a metaphor. It's interpreted as literal, biblical evidence for that identity theft theory we just discussed.
That brings us to Section 3, from Ophir to America. Now, the theory takes a pretty big geographic leap, arguing that to really understand American history, you have to look at the biblical land of Ophir.
This next claim really hinges on biblical geography. The Bible talks about a land rich in gold called Ophir, which was reached by King Solomon's navy. The question is, where does this research archive claim Ophir was actually located? The archive's answer is the Americas, specifically the territories of ancient Peru and the Incas. This is a huge claim, as it attempts to place a biblical-era civilization squarely in the Western Hemisphere.
So if Ophir was in the Americas, this theory then has to re-identify the people who live there. How does this research classify the indigenous peoples of the Americas, like the Mayans, Olmecs, and Incas?
The answer given is that they were Western Hebrew Israelite Admiralties. The term Admiralty here seems to imply organized, seafaring communities who, according to this research, established a major presence in the Americas long before Columbus ever arrived.
We've now arrived at the final section, and this is where all the previous points converge. It focuses on the central thesis of the entire archive, the 1619 deception.
This slide lays out the core argument pretty clearly. On one side, you have the conventional history of 1619, the beginning of African slavery in America. On the other, you have the archive's view, that this was a legal fiction. The claim is that it wasn't about bringing cheap labor from Africa, but was a cover for a hostile repatriation, essentially the rounding up of Hebrew people who were already living in the Americas.
The archive breaks this alleged repatriation down into a three-step process. First, you identify the target. Certain African tribes, like the Dahomey, are identified as prisoners of war. Second, you have the extraction. Portuguese forces are framed as bounty hunters tasked with their capture. And third, logistics and navigation.
The theory claims Moors acted as middlemen, providing the maritime logistics for this exchange. And now for our final question. This moves us from history to the present day. This body of research has been used to generate a legal cease and desist document. What is its ultimate stated goal?
The stated purpose is to protect the intellectual property of the archive. The goal is to prevent what the authors call identity thieves from using their research. And with that, the formal examination is over.
So that was the exam. We've just walked through the key claims of a complex and highly controversial archive, all framed as a test of knowledge. It's a fascinating way to present information, but it leaves us with a bigger question. When a narrative is presented not as just a theory, but as a true history that you can be tested on, what does that reveal about how stories shape our sense of identity, our history, and our very idea of truth itself? That's something worth thinking about.